As companies continue to utilize cloud computing in their IT plans, there will be a continual need to understand what is new and how to incorporate it so it best serves your organization. This webinar will help you learn about the different ways people are currently adopting the cloud, some things to consider as you plan the right strategy for your company, and the implications of security and disaster recovery. We have two speakers today who are very close to the technology around cloud adoption. Our first speaker is Dan Thompson, who is a senior analyst with 451 Research and is focused on the multi-tenant data center market. Prior to 451 Research, Dan spent 15 years as a practitioner in the IT industry, including 10 years at a top managed cloud service provider. Dan has degrees in network security and forensics and information technology. Craig Hurley will be our second speaker. As VP of Product Management at Cosentry, Craig is responsible for the entire life cycle of Cosentry's data center, hosting, cloud, and managed services portfolio. Craig has spent over 15 years in the IT and data management industries. So Dan, you want to get started?
All right, yes, thank you very much. Thanks Kyle for that kind introduction. If you're not familiar with 451, just give me a half a second here to sort of explain who we are. So 451 Research is a company that provides insight into the technology industry. And as Kyle mentioned, I'm on the multi-tenant data center team, but there are 12 other teams covering different facets of technology also represented at 451. So we do our research in many different ways. One is through the Voice of the Enterprise survey system, which I'll be sort of highlighting data from today. So what Voice of the Enterprise is essentially a survey that we do once a quarter. These are massive surveys, and they take the form of email surveys. Some of them are just online surveys. And then there's a good number of them also that we do through over-the-phone interviews, where we're actually talking to CIOs, CTOs, whomever, and asking them questions and getting real-time feedback. And so this isn't just, like a survey monkey kind of thing. This is, very in-depth surveys where we ask lots and lots of IT leaders from around the world and around the U.S., what they're thinking and what they're planning. So, of course, any presentation would be remiss without a nice little slide with a bunch of logos on it. So this is an example of some of the people that we work with and some of the people who you will essentially be hearing from today in our presentation. So what I really hope you walk away with here, though, is sort of a sense as to what's going on in the industry around you. If all you do is sort of, read magazines or maybe catch some blogs, you may get a somewhat skewed sense of reality as to the uptake of cloud and, where all your peers are going. So above all else, what I hope that you walk away from today is a sense of what your peers are doing. And then maybe, that may give you some justification for your current strategy and maybe give you some ideas as to new strategies as well. So just hopefully get you thinking and get the gears turning. So moving on, the first thing that I want to sort of hit you with here is the IT deployment location. So we asked all of our survey respondents, where is it that your IT gear sits today? Is it all in the cloud? Is it all in your facility? Or is it some combination thereof? And what we found was is that there's still a good amount of people who are not using the cloud at all. All their data and all their gear still sits inside their facilities. And then beyond that, the biggest group of people, though, are using some combination of both, so a hybrid deployment. And this is maybe interesting to you because the people who are only using third-party co-location or only using cloud represents just shy of 17% of all the businesses that we queried. So maybe somewhat in contrast to what you may believe if you only listen to Amazon or you only listen to some of the trade magazines and things like that. The uptake and the move to cloud is a little bit slower, I think, than people get the impression of. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do it. It's just to say that people are, going hybrid first, and that's sort of how they're testing the water, so to speak. So if we look at the cloud adoption model, this is another stat that may be in somewhat contrast to what you would believe if you were just sort of reading blogs and things like that. So we asked people, where are you on this road to cloud adoption? Test and development is always the use case that gets thrown out there. People always want to say test dev, but the reality is people have sort of moved past test and development. Today what we see are, the respondents to our surveys are saying that they are either in the initial implementation of a production application or they're in broad implementation of production applications. So this says to us that people's trust in the cloud has gone up and that people are ready to commit to it. They're ready to move those production workloads to the cloud and get the benefits of that. One thing I do want to point out with this slide, you may notice that the 2015 numbers are slightly smaller than the 2014 numbers. You may also notice that the number of respondents in Q1 was a little bit bigger. So when we look at these numbers, we would typically say that it's just sort of go with the average of both, and it was probably a little bit more accurate number with Q1 just because we've got more people responding. So don't be scared by the number shrinking. we would think that the thing to focus here on are which bars are bigger, and that's the fact that most people are either in the initial implementations or broad implementations of their cloud strategies and applications that they're moving there. So moving on to the next idea here. So which of the following types of cloud services, if any, is your organization using today? And of course, software as a service sort of takes the king spot here as the top spot. And I don't think this is any surprise really to anyone with the success of things like Salesforce and Office 365. Those have such market penetration and are so well known in the market today that it seems very logical that SaaS would be at the top there. That's also followed quickly by on-premise private cloud and hosted private cloud. The on-premise private cloud, of course, is popular because of the prevalence of various virtualization platforms that are out there today. And then, from that has bled over into people looking for orchestration and ways to sort of automate those on-site virtualization environments and make them a true cloud environment. That, of course, has given way to hosted private clouds. So the logic here is that people sort of get comfortable with their on-site cloud and they're ready to move to a hosted cloud somewhere. And what we see over and again is that the hosted private, people tend to be more comfortable with. They have more control over it. They feel that the resources will be theirs, and they're not going to have to compete with sort of a noisy neighbor scenario. So people tend to go first to hosted private cloud, and then we see them moving out into the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. And what's interesting here, you'll note that infrastructure as a service is quickly gaining on hosted private cloud. However, we found that interesting as well, and so we dug in a little bit there. And what's interesting here is that if you look at infrastructure as a service compared to hosted private cloud, the respondents to our surveys pointed out that they're more likely to have business-critical applications in hosted private cloud today than they are on infrastructure as a service. And again, I think this sort of goes back to the trust question. This is where people are comfortable. This is where people are sort of okay doing their initial test and development and then sort of moving into that broad implementation that we were talking about just a minute ago. So I do tend to think that these numbers will continue to change over time. I don't think we're locked into what you see here on the screen now. I think this definitely will change, but this is certainly where we are today. So thinking about security for just one second, it seems like you can't talk about cloud without security coming up. And so this is a stat that I love to throw in here and just sort of talk about where we are as far as the security landscape and how that sort of impacts things for cloud uptake. And what's interesting here is, first and foremost, we do have a difference in correspondence here. So some of the drift here will be accounted for just a bigger sampling size, but there is very definitely a drift going on where people are finding it less security, less and less of a factor into their decision-making process. And what that says to me is that people are getting more and more comfortable with the idea that cloud can be secure. Perhaps it can be more secure than what they're doing on site. And so we are seeing a drift there. another point of interest here when you think about this is even though 48% or 56%, depending on which quarter you look at, even though all those people say that there's a significant impact, when thinking about security and cloud computing, it's not stopping people from moving to the cloud. So previous slides, you've seen all these people who are moving to the cloud or moving to infrastructure as a service or some combination thereof. While security is heavy on their minds, it's not stopping them. And I think this is an interesting point to bring up because security very definitely should be part of your security or your decision-making process, but it shouldn't stop you. And I think Craig and others can speak to that as well. But just something to throw out there and think of because, as I said, you can't talk about cloud without security coming up, and it's definitely something that should be considered. So where do we see this going sort of longer term, right? I mean, where does this go? Where are people's money going to go over the next 3 to 5 years? So we asked them, we asked our correspondents, what is your organization's application portfolio going to look like over the next several years? And this is what they responded with. So over the next 3 years, co-location and cloud services are going to increase, and they're going to continue to whittle away at the lead of company-owned data centers and IT sites. Those company-owned data centers and IT sites, though, aren't going away, at least for the next 3 years anyway. And so, I think what I find interesting about this is that cloud sort of accelerates, but co-location isn't going anywhere. And I think that's sort of a popular conversation amongst the co-location crowd these days is, lots of people are sort of afraid that, that maybe co-location will go away one day and cloud will rule everything. And, perhaps that'll happen 10 years from now, but at least in the foreseeable horizon, co-location isn't going anywhere, and frankly, neither are on-site IT gear. And I think that can be contributed to several different things, one of which is that what we've seen is that applications some of them simply don't work well in the cloud. And so to think about this is also one of my favorite slides to always throw out because this always gets people talking. And I think the reason why is people sort of assume that enterprises have this ability to plan better than the rest of us. And the reality is, their people at the enterprise level are still sort of figuring all this stuff out right along with us, whether you're in the SMB space or wherever. So what we have been tracking lately is this whole idea of public cloud repatriation. And what I mean by that is it's sort of a fancy way of saying people have tried things in the public cloud and they didn't work, so they're moving them somewhere else. So where they're moving them, I think, is probably just as interesting as that they are moving them. So 50% of the people that said yes, they have pulled things out of the public cloud, those workloads landed in hosted private clouds. And then 18% of those said that they landed on on-premise private cloud. So 68% of all the enterprises that we surveyed said that they had moved at least an application back out of the public cloud. Now, from this, I don't believe that there's going to be this mass exodus of public cloud, but what this does say is that it affirms the fact that some applications just simply don't work well in the public cloud. And typically what we see when we talk to enterprises and we've asked them, sort of dig in a little bit more as to what applications they're pulling back out of the cloud, almost always what we hear is it's some sort of legacy application. It's some application that just wasn't architected for the cloud. Enterprises tried to move it there anyway, and either for performance reasons or economic reasons, it just didn't play out the way they'd hoped it would. Obviously, to really take advantage of the economies of public cloud, you need to be able to do, rapid scaling. You need to be able to take advantage of distributed architectures, and sometimes, these older applications, you just can't pull that off without a major retooling of the application. And so the response then is to move that back out of the cloud. This, by the way, can be a challenging endeavor. If you've ever tried to move something to the public cloud and then pull it back out without losing data, that can be challenging. So if you find yourself in that situation, you'll definitely want to find a partner who can help you with that. And I think that's something that we're commonly seeing as people are selecting partners for these sort of cloud applications and cloud operations is someone who's familiar with cloud environments and who can move things back and forth, and maybe more importantly even, is a partner who can help you select the appropriate execution venue. And what I mean by that is someone who knows where a workload will work better. Maybe it works here on private cloud, maybe it works there on public cloud, but a partner who can tell you that and sort of explain the differences and why something may work better in one venue over another. So one thing that's interesting, I think, when we talk to people is that it's not just about infrastructure. So a lot of times I think we get this sort of skewed idea that when people say cloud, all they mean is sort of an infrastructure play. But the reality is much different than that, and I find this particularly fascinating. So 31% of the respondents said that, or excuse me, 31% of people's budgets is to infrastructure hosting. And then the rest of it is a combination of managed services, application hosting, and security services. And security services is probably one of the ones that I'm most excited about because I see this market having tons and tons of potential, especially if you're in a business that's vertical focused, so like financials or, healthcare. These people are particularly focused and interested in security. And I think the cloud can be an excellent way to deliver those types of services. So we do see more spending there, and I do see that growing over time as well. Managed services, again, this is very popular because people are wanting help with the cloud. They're wanting help with their IT infrastructure. Where we see the most value there is, perhaps you have an IT department today, and you don't feel like you can afford to hire more IT staff, and so you look towards managed services to sort of assist you in your day-to-day operations, and perhaps, it allows you to think outside the box, and maybe it allows your IT department to focus on things that are more critical to the business, and then you let the managed services company sort of deal with the day-to-day minutia of, servers and worrying about patching and things like that. And then finally, application hosting. This can sort of be a similar play to what I was just describing with managed services. Perhaps your IT department is sort of tired of dealing with, day in, day out servers and, the applications that run on them, and we just want that application to work, and we don't want to have to deal with it, and we don't have to deal with the maintenance of it. So we turn that application over to a company who can host it for us and sort of drive all that value behind the scenes. So digging into that a little bit deeper, we asked a group of service providers, hey, where are you guys finding success? What is the most popular services that you're offering, and what is it that customers really seem to be interested in? And so this is sort of looking at it from a different side of the coin. But looking at managed services, backup and recovery, disaster recovery, site recovery, those are the top sort of things in managed services that we see people selling and see people being successful with. And also probably the most mature products that are out there in the market as far as managed services are concerned. There's lots of value I see here, whether it be getting your backups off-site or just letting someone else deal with them because they're a major pain in the rear. Managed services can be a huge benefit there. And then digging on down a little bit further, application development tools and platforms. We see a lot of movement here, people either trying to adapt a more agile philosophy to their development, or just want to try to think about things a little bit differently. That's popular. And then, of course, mobile services and premium 24/7 services sort of bringing up the last half of those. Thinking about application hosting, database and email are extremely popular. I think email, the prevalence of Office 365 out there in the world today, and just hosted email is really, really popular, just because the pain of having to deal with an email server and having to put up with the management and the maintenance of it over time can be a little bit hard to deal with. And email has almost gotten to the point today where it's commoditized, and so letting someone else deal with that, and then you just have the benefit of email and things like that, I think is an excellent thing. If you're thinking about outsourcing something or thinking about moving something outside your organization, those are very popular services. And then moving on finally here to security services. These are services, like endpoint security or encryption, perhaps things that are sort of harder to pull off. And then moving on down the line, we see people offering, web application firewalls, and advanced anti-malware, anti-spam, things like that. And the takeaway here, I think, is that these are either services which have been commoditized, like I mentioned, they've been commoditized over time, or perhaps they're services that are sort of hard to do on your own. And where I think this leaves us is simply that today we have moved from a point of Cloud 1.0 to Cloud 2.0. Now, what do I mean by that exactly? Well, Cloud 1.0 we sort of defined as, it was exciting. It was all about the technology. It was all about, engineering is sort of leading the way, and we're going to figure this whole cloud thing out. But we've really moved to a point today to where the customer, the customer, matters most. It's about solving real business problems. It's not about technology for technology's sake anymore. It's about you actually accomplishing something for my business that's of real value. And whether that's giving time back to our IT department so they can focus on things that are of real value to our businesses, or it allows us to innovate and expand into new areas, whatever the reason is it's all about you, the customer, now, and it's not so much about the technology anymore. The technology, we sort of need it to get out of the way so that we can find value for our money, and these can be very predictable decisions for us. And so that's the world as I see it. Let me move this on over to Craig. And Craig, thank you for letting me talk for just a little bit. Take it away, sir.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. That was some great data there, and I think the one thing that I would definitely agree to is the change that we've seen is we're not just selling technology for technology's sake, as you mentioned. I think what we had experienced over the last several years in this industry is just a focus on technology and selling the technology to customers. And now what we see is really customers coming to us with a need, and how can technology solve that need? And so it really has changed, I believe, in terms of the approach to customers and to CIOs and CEOs, just as you were mentioning. So let me move the presentation on forward here. And so just, again, my name is Craig Hurley. I run product management here at Cosentry. And first of all, just for those of you that are not familiar with Cosentry, we have been around for almost 15 years now, headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska, and we have we're in several different markets throughout the Midwest. So we do have 9 data centers focused in, as you see here, the Omaha, Nebraska area, Kansas City, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, St. Louis, Missouri, and also Milwaukee. So we are a regional provider focused in the Midwest. We are a service provider that traditionally has evolved from providing a lot of the services that Dan has been talking about. So between co-location, managed hosting, cloud, managed services, help desk services, these are all the different solutions that we've been offering to our customers for many years now. We are primarily focused on mid-market companies and serving as an extension to their IT team. So that is really the strategy that we have here, being that an extension of a customer's IT team, working with them to make the recommendations that best suit their business needs. So we saw a lot of good data here, and I think one of the other key points that Dan mentioned, if you are just following the blogs or the magazine articles, boy, you think everything is that all your competition is 100% in the cloud. Companies like Netflix that are running 100% in Amazon, and you're wondering, boy, why am I not doing that? What am I doing wrong? And there really is a lot of noise out there today. A lot of the articles are written about cloud-native applications, new applications being written and developed in the public cloud, be it Amazon, be it Azure. At the same time, one of the topics that really is talked about a lot these days is the Internet of Things, and the fact that every single device or material good that you come across on a daily basis is somehow going to be connected to the Internet, be it your refrigerator or your thermostat. All of these things are happening today, and certainly it's generating a lot of good press. But at the same time, there's the majority of the real activity is focused around some of the more traditional things like co-location, like hosted private cloud that Dan was talking about. So there really is a lot of noise out there, a lot of different paths that you can take, and it depends upon a customer's comfort level with outsourcing. It depends on the application, really, in terms of which path you want to take. And so, where at Cosentry, what we try to do when talking to our customers is really to help educate them about this journey. Again, as we talked about, there's a lot of press about the pure play public cloud, but there is a path to get there, and that path is really based upon your own particular comfort level. So what we had seen, let's say, over the past 10 years was the question that a lot of enterprises had about, should I go into co-location or should I expand my own data center, build a new data center? And for the most part, those conversations don't happen anymore unless you're, some of the big enterprises out there building data centers today, like the Facebooks and the Yahoos and the Googles. Those are the ones that are really building data centers today. But for the most part, most companies in the mid-market, in enterprises, they're not building data centers today. If they still are going to own the gear, then they're looking for co-location. And so for the most part, that's a discussion that really has evolved. But that is where really this journey has begun. Then where we see or have seen a lot of the discussion is, okay, should I co-locate or should I lease hardware? This is really the CapEx versus OpEx decision that traditionally a lot of organizations have had to face. Do I want to hug my servers, quite frankly? Do I want to be able to go into my co-location environment and touch the physical gear? Or am I looking to leverage a provider that can lease me that hardware in a third-party data center, and I don't have to worry about that CapEx? That's a conversation that's been happening for many years, and it still does certainly happen. But what we see more is now the right-hand side of the screen here, which is really which cloud, and this is where customers are looking to figure out, should I go to a private cloud, should I leverage the public cloud, or a hybrid? And a hybrid could be a combination of working between a private cloud and a public cloud, or a public cloud and co-location for that matter. So this is really where we see most of the conversation taking place today. Should I go to a hosted private cloud? Should I go public? And where we have the conversation with our customers, again, it really depends upon the application in many instances. It depends upon what sort of performance, what sort of service level you're looking for, and there isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all, but it's a conversation that we have quite a bit these days with our customers, and a lot of it has to do with how, as you look across the entire spectrum here, what's the level of comfort that a customer has, again, with outsourcing a particular skill set. So if you look here on the left-hand side in terms of co-location, if for those customers that are looking to co-locate, they're looking for the third-party provider to manage the data center, to manage the network, to manage the physical security, and the customer is going to manage everything else on their hardware and software, what have you. If they're looking to get out of owning their own hardware, then this is where a service provider can manage further up the stack, providing that hardware, and in that instance, managing the servers, managing the storage, managing the hypervisor layer, and the customers managing the OS and above. What we see now increasingly are customers that are looking to focus more on their application itself. What is it that they can do that can help differentiate themselves from their competition? And for the most part, that means allocating their IT resources, be it their people or their budget, to their application, and not to those other things which these days can be outsourced, and that would be managing the operating system, managing the database, managing the web layer. All of those different layers within the stack are now things that we see increasingly customers looking to outsource, and then they're just focused more on their application. But again, it does depend on the customer. It depends on the application. And so when we're talking to our customers, the most important thing that we get across is there is a journey. You don't need to start all the way to the right end of the spectrum. And by all means, you can start at different points in the spectrum based upon your particular application. So getting a little bit more granular then in terms of how can you leverage a service provider like Cosentry when you are looking to solve those problems that perhaps you don't want to solve anymore because it costs too much, you don't have the resources, and you want to focus on that which can help differentiate. I put up the slide that Dan shared because I think it's very applicable to the conversations that we have with customers and the efforts that we put in from a development perspective to be able to make these services available. So I'm just going to touch a little bit here on some of the managed services capabilities, some of the application hosting capabilities and security services that we at Cosentry are focused on, and quite frankly, the entire service provider space is focusing on to provide those solutions to meet your requirements. Again, not focusing on the technology for technology's sake, but on the requirement that you have from a business perspective. So again, Dan mentioned in that backup and DR space that's something where there's a lot of attention being played there. And this is really something that just over the last year or two has really ballooned in terms of a whole industry being created around this disaster recovery as a service model, or DRAS. And this really comes down to a lot of the reductions in costs from a hardware perspective, and a lot of new technology that's out there in terms of replication and failover, where a customer can now leverage a service provider regardless of whether or not you're hosting your application in that data center. Maybe you have applications still at your premise that you're looking to protect in the cloud for a disaster. These are now offerings that service providers like Cosentry can bring to the table to help protect those workloads. So this whole concept of DR as a service, again, this is really a solution where we're able to provide you with varying RTO, RPO solutions that meet your budget need. It's in a pure subscription model basis where basically you're not having to come up with any upfront capital costs. You're basically purchasing on a monthly basis the compute, the storage, the network, and a charge for typically on a per VM basis to manage the replication and ultimately the failover if necessary, or even in a test scenario. What most service providers are now able to provide in this DR as a service model is the ability to test your DR plan, and that's something that traditionally most organizations haven't been able to do, or I should say haven't been able to do well. Most DR tests fail in a customer's own scenario, but in a DR as a service model, the service provider is basically paying you're getting paid to make sure that solution is going to work. So it's a great offering that service providers like Cosentry are bringing to the table. So quickly, just going to go through a couple of different scenarios here as far as DR as a service, again, which covers not only backup but also replication technologies. So the way that we look at this is kind of a stair-step approach, where at the bottom of the stairs, perhaps you're looking for a less aggressive RTO, RPO, so recovery time objective, recovery point objective, and not willing to pay an exorbitant amount of money to protect your data in the cloud. And there's solutions here now that service providers are able to bring to the table to help with that particular aspect of your data. Moving up the stair step is where you can get more aggressive with your RPO, RTO requirements for, again, an incremental cost, but at the same time, quite affordable compared to the solutions that have been in place over the past 5 to 10 years. And this really, as I mentioned, is because there's a lot of new technologies out there these days as far as replication is concerned, be it from companies like Zerto or Geminair, that service providers are able to leverage to manage the replication and the failover of your workloads into the cloud. And those workloads could be, from a virtual machine, from a physical machine as the source, and that can fail over into the cloud. So this is something that we see a lot of customers interested in today, and there's still a lot of education that needs to take place here, especially when it comes to the affordability aspect. But it's really something that you should be taking advantage of. And finally, at the top of the stairs is it's halfway between DR and also focusing quite a bit on the application specific, but it's this concept of always on or high availability applications. And this is really the top of the stairs where you can have a specific application that maybe is on your prem, and maybe you can have that be architected in a way where there's a nearby data center and you can have that high availability solution running. And where we are now taking that, and this now gets into moves from that disaster recovery conversation into the application hosting conversation. There's a lot of activity going on, specifically in this HA scenario with SQL Server and leveraging Azure. So, there's like we talked about up front. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of blog posts, a lot of articles about Azure, about AWS. But where do you start? How do I leverage it? Well, I have here a couple specific use cases that really can focus on how you can leverage Azure and how a service provider can help you. So in this example here, one of the areas that Microsoft has really helped to enable is this concept of SQL DR in Azure, where a availability group can be architected between, in this instance, a Cosentry data center and Azure. So this is where you could have a hosted private cloud in the Cosentry data center running your production SQL Server, and at the same time be connected to Azure, where you can have that high availability environment running. So it's a specific component of disaster recovery, but targeting again the application being SQL Server and leveraging Azure. It's a great way for you to tip your toes into Azure. And again, also with SQL, there's the ability to leverage Azure for test dev. So in the instance here, again, we talk about what service providers like Cosentry are doing. We're providing customers with the ability to host their production SQL Server in a hosted private cloud in our data center, and can have that connected to Azure, where the test and development can take place in Azure, where the service provider, like in this case Cosentry, we can resell Azure to you, oftentimes at the same rate, if not better, than you would be procuring from Microsoft directly. And we're able to manage that Azure workload on your behalf, and also have the expertise to know, let's say, when you want to, in that test dev environment, spin down the workload so that you're only paying for the SQL licensing in Azure for when you need it. So this is one area where you can really leverage the knowledge that a service provider like Cosentry has in Azure to help you, architect your environments for SQL and really take advantage of the public cloud in this hybrid environment. Then moving forward, again, taking into consideration again the points that Dan was talking about, where a lot of activity was taking place, and Dan mentioned Mail and Office 365. And we definitely agree that mail has really become a commodity. It is something where as customers are looking to need to refresh their hardware, refresh their version of Exchange, they're no longer looking to do that, quite frankly. They're looking to figure out how to leverage Office 365. Where we can help there, service providers like Cosentry, we are talking to quite a few customers that, again, are in this mid-market space that want to leverage Office 365, but maybe they don't want to jump in right away migrating all of their users there. They want to operate in a hybrid environment where maybe they move a certain group of users there first, test it out, and then over time migrate other users. And that could just be comfort level. It could be because there's there's some hardware that still needs to that still has life in it. And so it could be that cost decision. And where Cosentry can help is we can not only work to migrate those customers, those users, to Office 365, but we can manage that hybrid environment. And by that I mean we can manage the synchronization between your Active Directory and Office 365. So one of the more complex things is how do you make sure that single sign-on takes place? How do you make sure that if you have certain users in Office 365 that the calendar sharing still takes place, the free busy still is visible across all of your users, and the synchronization between your Active Directory and Office 365 is an area where service providers can help. So I would encourage you, as you're looking to move into Office 365, if you're looking to that hybrid sort of environment, talk to your service provider because there's a lot of areas that they can help with that. And finally, then, just one other area that Dan had mentioned was related to security. And whenever we talk about security, it's not about being 100% secure, because we all know, we see the major security breaches that happen around the world, and they're from the largest organizations, it's from governments. And really the name of security is how do you mitigate your risk? How are you best assured that you're doing whatever it takes to minimize the potential of getting breached, or to minimize that breach? And what we do see with many of these security breaches is they're not happening necessarily in the cloud. They're happening at customer prem. And as Dan was referencing in some of his data, security is becoming less of a concern for customers as they're moving into the cloud. And what we see is because the cloud can be more secure than a customer's data center itself. And that can be not only the physical security aspect, but it can also be protecting the actual workloads, the actual data in the data center itself. And so one of the the areas that we see a lot of conversations happening today is just with regards to log monitoring. So certainly, when you look to move your workloads into the cloud, you can get all sorts of things like endpoint security, encryption. But what else can you do to help mitigate your risk even more? And that's where we, for instance, are able to bring log monitoring to the table in again, an OpEx model that helps you in terms of not having to go off and spend a lot of upfront money on procuring such a solution. And it's also something that we do for many customers every day. So you don't have to have the security expertise in-house to try to learn the solution. You can rely on a service provider to do that. And so that's one area where we see a lot of activity taking place today. Customers asking us for help in terms of providing them with that overall log monitoring type capability. So just in closing, this was just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the different areas where Cosentry is having conversations with our customers today around some of these specific use cases. I would encourage you, if you haven't heard Cosentry before, we do focus primarily on the Midwest, but that we're by no means strictly only can sell to customers in the Midwest. So if you have a requirement to leverage, for instance, our data centers from a DR perspective, or you're just looking to host in a data center that maybe is in an area that is less geographically restricted as far as natural disasters are concerned, then by all means you can reach out and have that conversation with us. So just Kyle, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out.
Great. Thanks, Craig. I want to thank Craig and Dan. I thought the webinar was great, and I'm sure the audience gained a lot of insight from your presentation, so thank you. Craig and Dan are available to address any questions that you may have. Their email addresses are on the slide, so please feel free to reach out if you want to have a discussion on any of the points they made. I'm sure they would be happy to do that as well. So I want to thank you for attending today, and hope you have a great day. Thanks.